Hi everyone, hope you are doing well. My name is Arman Puyai. I'm a PhD student at the University of Houston. Today I will be talking about development and implementation of a physics-based convective mixing scheme in the CMAQ modeling framework. To give you a general idea about CMAQ's convection modeling, first you need to know that CMAQ resolves the cloud impacts for clouds which are fully occupied the simulation grids, and uses parameterization for subgrid cloud modeling. This will help addressing the issue of non-local structures in horizontal space. But still, we have to consider vertical non-local structures by introducing the impacts of the updraft and upward flux, which initiates somewhere in the above cloud, downdraft or precipitation, entrainment and detrainment, the two-way transfer of air between cloud and the environment, and also the compensating subsidence. Then we will have a more physical and effective vertical convective mixing. Also, studies have showed that consistency of the cloud parameterization between chemical transport models and meteorological models really help in reducing the uncertainties associated with cloud convection. Considering the previously discussed subjects, we designed this study to achieve these two objectives. One, to develop a more physically accurate scheme of subgrid cloud parameterization, and two, to enhance the capabilities of the CMAQ model to simulate the vertical distributions of chemical species in the layers of the atmosphere where convection has occurred. The steps that we took for this study includes first, introducing the KF convection, explaining its differences with a current CMAQ model. Then we designed an idealized case, where we removed all the physical process of the CMAQ and only focused on the KF convection impact. Then we moved this we moved our model to a real case scenario. The KORUS-AQ aircraft campaign in 2016 over East Asia. And finally, we discussed the impacts of KF convection by separating the vertical change in concentration and long-range transport of pollutants. Generally, CMAQ uses this equation for its cloud modeling. The subgrid and resolve grid of cloud models update the pollutant concentrations. And it uses this cloud mixing equation, which is inherited from the RADM, regional acid deposition model. And at the end, the average pollutant concentrations are calculated based on the water content in different layers. So we mostly focus on this equation, on cloud mixing part, but we try to introduce some detailed processes in here to make the model more physically accurate in nature. Well, the KF convection model that we developed for CMAQ is based on the well-known Kain and Fritsch convection scheme. First, I have to say that we use the dynamic description of clouds, which all the cloud shape related parameters were imported from the WRF KF cumulative scheme. The information regarding the mass flux variables are also imported from WRF. And we use the WRF CMAQ two-way system because it was more straightforward for transferring all these variables. We had to only turn off the feedback mechanism for this stage. The general structure of the algorithm is like this. First, we define all the cumulus convection variables. We get these variables from WRF, and for all the simulation grid points, we check where there is deep convection is happening or shallow convection is happening. And based on each one, we first compute the updraft effect, which is like a transport of the concentrations to different layers based on the updraft flux. Then entrainment and detrainment effect are introduced. And then we compute the effect of compensating due to the updraft. And we have the downdraft effect computation, which like it starts from the precipitation layer to the downdraft bottom layer. Then we compute the entrainment detrainment of the downdraft, and at the end, the effect of compensating due to the downdraft. The shallow convection is the same as deep convection, but only it happens for the updraft. At the end, we update the concentration matrices and continue to the rest of the scheme. So this table shows the main differences between standard CMAQ subgrid scheme and the KF convection cloud modeling. The temporal resolution for standard CMAQ is 1 hour, but we were able to use a synchronization time because of the WRF CMAQ two-way system, which is 6 minutes. And that's actually very detailed. So the shape of the cloud geometry and all these variables, the fluxes, they're all updated every 6 minutes. I also mentioned that cloud geometry for the standard CMAQ is based on CMAQ parameterization, but here we use the dynamic model from WRF and the vertical mixing, CMAQ parameterization, but we develop our own model, which is right here. And the convection classification, which standard CMAQ considers a general cloud, but we separate it to deep and shallow convection. In this slide, we study the idealized case to achieve a more comprehensive understanding of the changes in concentration. We implemented the process over 35 vertical layers from the bottom to the top of the domain in 10 synchronization time steps, lasting a total of 60 minutes. The objective of this part was to study the general concept of the KF convection main code. We wanted to see if it works. To this end, we studied several cases. 4 of them are like deep convection with updraft, deep convection with downdraft only, deep convection with updraft and downdraft, shallow convection with updraft. For all these cases, we accounted for the effect of entrainment, detrainment, and subsidence. Here you can see the deep convection with updraft and downdraft plus the effects of entrainment, detrainment, and subsidence. In the left, the concentration profile, you can see how this changes from the before KF convection and after applying the KF convection. On the right, you can see all these mass fluxes rates. Basically, the updraft mass flux has the highest impact, and also the downdraft mass flux. These two has the highest impact. The entrainment, detrainment, the level of impact is lower. The updraft impact pushes up the concentrations from originating layer to the top of the cloud, and the downdraft flux and all the entrainment, detrainment has negative flux rate, which is doing like opposite from top to the bottom, like reduce the concentrations from this part and increase the concentrations in the bottom layer of the downdraft, which is over the surface. So this is for like 10 times the real case impact, and it shows that how much it can increase the carbon monoxide concentrations in ppb over different layers, the KF convection, how much its impact is important. The next step was to move the model to a real case scenario, which was a East Asia domain, which covers the eastern part of China, the Korean Peninsula, South Korea, Japan, and we use the WRF CMAQ two-way framework, and here you can see the configuration, different parameterizations that we chose for WRF and CMAQ. For example, here the cumulative scheme had to be Kain and Fritsch because we wanted all those cloud geometry related and also the mass flux variables for the KF convection of the CMAQ. And in the bottom here, you can see we compared only for the days that we saw convection from the flight observations. This is the carbon monoxide concentrations compared with the modeled ones compared with the observed ones for the standard and KF convection. Basically, what KF convection did that it changed the concentration for different layers, and when we compared with observation, we saw that it improved the accuracy of the model. In this slide, we try to show the spatial difference, the spatial analysis of the CO concentrations in the aircraft tracks for the days that we chose, the convection days. The first row shows the aircraft measurements, and in the second row, we can see the KF convection model. And basically, there is like a little underestimation of the CO concentrations from KF convection model and also the standard CMAQ model. But the thing is that the KF convection model tries to mostly push up the concentrations to the higher levels, and basically we will have like a better concentrations at the upper levels most of the time. Because of this underprediction, it tries to reduce this underprediction. As you can see in the last row, the difference of the KF minus standard is mostly positive, and in some cases there are negative, which are basically those layers, those altitudes that the concentrations were reduced by downdraft flux. To see the general transport impact from a satellite view, we try to compare the CO columns of the simulations with the MOPIT observed CO column. And we compared it for all the May, for the whole months of May, and for the different days that we saw convection during the KORUS-AQ campaign. Generally, the KF convection model were changing concentrations in some parts in a positive way and some parts in a negative way. The overall impact was improving the performance of the transport of the carbon monoxide column. With this plot, we try to analyze the direct impact of KF convection in vertical layers, and we try to show that how KF convection is causing these differences. In the first two plots, you can see the KF convection and standard CMAQ compared to the points are the flight CO measurements. And third panel is the difference. Fourth and fifth are the fluxes. I will talk on the third panel mostly. So here you can see that how concentrations of the carbon monoxide is changing over 3 to 5 kilometer altitudes, and it's like decreasing over 3 to 1 kilometer altitudes. This increase in this higher altitude is because of the updraft flux, which is pushing up the concentrations from the lower layers to the top layers. And here you can also see this impact totally. It's completely as changing with the pattern of the updraft flux. And in some days, this originating layer and ending layer of the updraft and downdraft flux are different. So the impact, you can see it's different for those days, for example, for May 12th. The impact from the KF convection was not only the vertically, but also it causes a spatial difference, long-range transport impacts. We can see, for example, I compared for all days in 3 kilometer altitude, this spatial difference of the carbon monoxide. And also I followed the wind patterns and the pressure field And I tried to see the process analysis results to focus more on the impacts and differentiate between the impacts that are caused with long-range transport, the advection, and also the impacts which are caused with cloud convection, or the direct impact that we talked in the last slide. Here you can see that, for example, for the last 2 days, you can see that sometimes the impact which is observed in the KORUS-AQ measurement locations are caused by the cloud convection, and for sometimes it is mostly due to the in 3-kilometer altitude. It's due to the transport of the these CO differences. For example, here in 3-kilometer, you can see that the CO differences are moving from. You can see a clear transport of these CO concentrations. And what we saw that it's not always the direct impact. You cannot just see this concentration moving and changing the because of the mass flux parameters. It changes all the vertical layers, concentrations of vertical layers. But we can also see that this impact from another regions and neighboring regions can cause move the concentrations to higher layers and transport in the higher layers, and then we can see that impact from another region. What we see here is that the impact was happening over the Chinese coast, and it's being transported. The concentration differences are being transported to the Korean region. So to give you a general summary of the work, we introduced KF convection model, which is a more physically accurate convective mixing, which is consistent with metrology model. And we saw an improved vertical profile of concentrations and improved long-range transport of pollutants. This model can be employed in large domains like East Asia, Europe, North America, North Hemisphere, where subgrid scale cloud modeling. We need the subgrid scale cloud modeling to include the impact of convection. And you can, from here, you can see the detailed description of the model and the model source code. This study was funded by National Research Foundation of Korea, and the study was published in the Journal of Advances in Modeling Air System. Thank you so much for your attention, and here you can find some of my contact information if you are willing to reach out to me.